I was working 12-hour overnights in a nursing home. I was on the general unit that night, and a resident was close to death. I got a report when I arrived at 6 p.m. from the day nurse, who told me that Mary's circling the drain. She'll go for you tonight. Obvious name change for patient privacy. She also told me that Mary suddenly had family showing up now that she was dying. Unfortunately, this is very common. Residents lived with us for years, and we would never see a single family member until they were dying. Our residents were all private-paying folks that could afford like $8,000 to $10,000 a month for high-end nursing home care. The rooms looked like Hilton suites. When somebody was close to death, family members would crawl out of the woodwork to prove how much they loved Grandma and all of her jewelry. Mary lived with us for 4 years, and I honestly didn't even know she had family. Her attorney visited regularly, but he was paid to oversee her care. I went to meet the family. There was a son and a grandson sitting in the room, and a little great-granddaughter that was about 7 or 8 years old, sitting on the floor outside the room in the hallway. The adults sat in Mary's room sleeping or playing on laptops and let the little girl run all over the unit without any supervision. It was a long night. The little girl was not afraid of the elderly residents at all. I first caught her standing in another resident's room, stroking the face of an elderly woman. I thought it was sweet she was visiting other residents, but I stepped into the room and asked her to leave. I told her to please go back to her great-grandma's room and not to go into other residents' rooms. She smiled prettily and said, "I like the way her skin feels," as she left the room. Okay, so the kid is a little creepy. She goes back to Mary's room, and I go about my duties. I haven't seen the kid for a while, and it's pretty late, so I assume they took her home. About 1 a.m., I come out of the medication room, and I see this kid standing in the hallway all by herself. She is staring into another resident's room, but not going in. I walk down the hall to send her back to her great-grandma's room again. This time, I am really annoyed that her family is letting her run around at 1 a.m. at her age all by herself in a nursing home. As I walk up to her, before I can say anything, she smiles at me and asks, "Do you like to touch them?" Completely forgetting what I wanted to say, I just stare at her and say, "What?" She looks into the resident's room she was standing outside of and says, "The old people. Do you like touching them? Like when they're dead, I mean." I don't even know what to say to this. It's dark and this kid is very creepy. She is way too articulate for how old she looks as well. When I don't reply, she asks, "Does their skin feel any different when they're dead?" Not knowing what to say to a smiling kid who asks if I like touching dead bodies, I just tell her to go back to her great-grandma's room. She glares at me and looks angrier than I thought a kid could look, but she walks back to her great-grandma's room. Mary died at about 4 a.m. I did not see the little kid again, but I was afraid that I would see her in there rubbing Mary's skin. The son and grandson left before the funeral home arrived to take the body, but I didn't see the little girl leave with them. I assumed that they took her home after we had our enlightening chat about how dead people feel. Gave me the creeps that I never saw her leave. I kept looking over my shoulder the rest of the night for that damn kid. The next morning, I told the day shift nurse, the same one from the day before, about how creepy the little kid was. She told me, "I'm glad she wasn't here on my shift. I just had the son and grandson." She swore that the little girl was not there on her shift. I guess she must have arrived after my shift started. It was as I drove home that I realized that I had not seen anyone else interact with the kid all night except for me. I never saw anyone talk to her, and I never actually walked her into Mary's room. I also didn't confront her family about the kid's actions because I did not want to seem rude complaining about their kid when their loved one was dying. The family had never mentioned the kid at any time I was in the room doing cares on Mary. Even the resident she was touching at the start of my shift never woke up as she stroked her cheek. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. Every night at work from then on, I always kept my eye out for creepy little girls though. Kids in hospitals/medical facilities still creep me out to this day. In 2011, I was apartment hunting and found this one place that seemed perfect. There was a main house. Behind it was a guest house that had been recently renovated into a duplex. The ground floor of the guest house had been converted into a large covered garage that could fit 3 cars plus a ton of storage items. It was really musty, had a terrifying spider population, and lacked working lights. A flight of wobbly wooden steps led up to a second floor deck where 2 side-by-side entrance doors for the separate apartments were. When I first moved in, the guest house had just finished renovations, and the rental agency hadn't found anyone for the other apartment yet. I enjoyed the peace and quiet, which was perfect for studying. A few months after school started in the fall, a new girl moved in. She introduced herself as Angela and said she went to the same school as me, that she was studying biology and was a freshman. She seemed nice and was pretty quiet at first. However, of course, cute nightmare. After the first month, I started hearing an annoying clopping noise emanating from her apartment. It sounded like she had cloven hoofs. She had wood floors, and the sound echoed like crazy. It would suddenly start at 3 a.m., and it would wake my dogs, and they would start howling. Soon, I started hearing the most comical sex noises ever. It sounded like the cheesiest, loudest porn in existence, with never-ending fake orgasms. This went on every day, multiple times a day. At first I thought, good for her. After the third day, though, I was very tired of it. Bye-bye perfect study environment. One day, when I was getting ready to step outside to grab the mail, I heard voices out on the deck talking. One male, one Angela. I peeked out through my peephole and saw an older guy, maybe about 60 years old, with a fat belly, white hair, and a sweat-stained undershirt. This was maybe 10 minutes following one of the most comical sex routines. I assumed that she had a super old sugar daddy and waited until they left to grab my mail. A week later, I pulled into the back alley that led to the garage entrance and saw a car parked in front of the garage, blocking the entrance. I assumed Angela had a friend over who decided to park there. I knocked on her door and she answered in feathered lingerie and clear platform stripper shoes. A very sweaty and out-of-breath older guy said he would move the car. By this point, I had realized that Angela was a prostitute. I excitedly texted my friends the news and we laughed about it. The next night, it was really dark out. I had gone to the grocery store and pulled into the back alley. The floodlight was out and it was unnervingly dark. I always hate pulling into the garage because it's insanely creepy, especially when it's this dark out. However, I opened up the door, slid my car in, and then get out to unload. A dark shadow stood at the garage entrance next to my trunk. Hello? I almost peed my pants, though I liked my guest house. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, and I was convinced I was going to be mugged finally. Instead, the man made small talk, asking me if I lived next door to Angela, if I was a student, how I liked the area, and if I had a boyfriend, etc. He told me I was beautiful and that he'd always wanted an Asian girlfriend. I walked closer to him and saw it was the man from the other week, with the white hair and sweat-stained shirt. I was really evasive and asked him if he needed any help. When he said he wanted to get to know me, I just said no thanks. He told me he would pay me. I realized he probably thought I was a prostitute too, and I quickly told him to screw off. I rushed past him and went upstairs, leaving my groceries in the car and the garage door wide open. Shortly after, I started noticing that things were going missing or moved in my apartment. Clothes would go missing. I'd hunt desperately for a pair of leggings or a dress or bra, and I would never be able to find them, even after searching the laundry hamper. Stuff like mail or books would be moved from one room to another. My dogs and cat also started acting really skittish. Sometimes I would catch them staring intently up at a corner. One night I woke up at around 3 a.m. to hear really serious scratching noises coming from the living room. It sounded like a large animal with big claws was digging away at something. I mumbled, "Muffin, stop." I felt the paw on my arm and slowly opened my eyes. Muffin was on the bed with me, looking at me nervously. "Okay, huh?" I sat up and looked around. My other dog and my cat were both sleeping soundly on my bed too. So, what was in the living room making scratching noises? I also noticed that my bedroom door, which I had shut when I had gone to sleep, was now wide open. Nope. I have never been one to believe in the supernatural, but I was pretty convinced based on the signs that there was a ghost living in my apartment. Maybe this guest house used to be slave quarters. I put in headphones to drown out the noise and stayed up all night doing paranormal research on my laptop. I never once got out of bed to check out the living room. I was way too terrified. The next day, I crated my dogs and cats and went to school. When I got home, I noticed a wall next to the front door had some really deep scratches. The drywall and paint were ruined. These hadn't been there the previous day, and my pets were crated while I was gone, so I couldn't figure out where these had come from. Must be the ghosts, I thought. The landlord had told me previously that there were paint cans in the garage, so I figured I would try to hide the ghost's mess with some paint. I went down in the garage. Right in front of my parking spot inside the garage, is this weird little workspace that somebody had constructed before I moved in. I never looked inside, but it was maybe 6x4 and had walls made of particle board. I didn't see any cans of paint on the garage floor, so I figured this was a storage room for stuff like that. I opened the makeshift door to the workspace. First, I saw shelves with paint cans. Great. Then I looked down and saw a blanket, pillows, a flashlight, a giant plastic canister of cheese balls, a big screwdriver, and a Velcro wallet. There was also a set of weird pull-down stairs at the top of the workspace, attached to the garage ceiling, like the kind you use with an attic. I picked up the wallet and looked inside. Bam. Photo ID of that creepy sweat-stained shirt guy. I immediately fled the garage and went into my apartment to call the cops and report that a homeless guy had apparently moved into my garage. The cops came to investigate. First, they found that the pull-down stairs led up to a door in the ceiling that resembled the ceiling tile. When you lifted and moved the ceiling tile aside, you were in my unused utility closet in my apartment. The cops asked if I ever noticed anything strange in my apartment, and I told them about the missing and moved around stuff. Apparently, the screwdriver found in the workspace had flecks of paint and drywall on it. I don't know why somebody would just sit in my living room and scratch at the wall with a screwdriver in the middle of the night, but I am so glad I never left my bedroom to look at the ghost now. The cops never found my missing clothes, though. The cops also never found or caught the guy. I tried to confront Angela about the weirdos she was bringing to our building and how one had been living in the garage and breaking into my apartment, but she mysteriously disappeared. No more comical sex noises or clopping. Mail piled up in her box. Then randomly a month later, a new guy was living there. Weirded out, I called the landlord, who said the new guy was a tenant and wouldn't give me information on what happened to Angela. Very creepy. When I was at the end of middle school and beginning of high school, I was on home instruction due to health reasons. It's different than homeschooling because they would send teachers from the school and you'd have 1 2 to 3 hour class a day, usually at a local library or sometimes your house. Because I wasn't in a proper school, I was pretty lonely and spent my time trying to make friends and socialize online. One of the websites that I met a lot of people on was Quizilla. RIP, by the way. I would make a lot of quizzes, some of which got popular, and read awful fanfiction stories on there that, as a young teenager, I found quite addicting. I talked to other people who wrote stories and made quizzes. This is how I met Chloe. Chloe was around my age, if not a year or so older, and eventually we left the Quizilla PM system and started talking on AIM. She always used her father's AIM account, saying she had overprotective parents. She lived in New Jersey and I was one state away in New York. After talking with Chloe for a bit, one day she says she wants to introduce me to a friend of hers. They know each other in real life, and she thought we would get along well since we all liked the same stuff, and that he was slightly older, 16, and his name was Matt. Matt and I instantly became friends. We talked for hours and hours every day and stayed up until very late at night talking to each other. If I wasn't in class, I was pretty much talking to him. I still talked to Chloe at first, but eventually we drifted apart, but Matt and I were growing a lot closer. For my birthday, he wanted to get me a gift, so I gave him my P.O. box. My parents didn't know I was talking to online people at the time, and I wanted to keep it that way so I wouldn't lose a lot of my friends. Technically, it was my dad's P.O. box, but he is less snoopy, and I made some kind of excuse about it being a friend who moved. I knew I couldn't have anything come to my house because my mom would be very suspicious and would not believe that. One day after many months of talking, Matt told me he liked me. I didn't return his feelings, but said I hoped we could still be friends. He was upset but took the rejection well, or so I thought, and our friendship continued. He'd mention it from time to time, that he still had feelings for me, and it made me a bit uncomfortable, but I valued him a lot as a friend and didn't know many people I could talk to all day like that, so I brushed it off. Matt started talking about his other friends in his town in New Jersey a lot. Eventually, he said he wanted to introduce me to his friend Jose. He had spoken a lot about Jose. Jose was around the same age as him and was recovering from drug problems. Having been in rehab, he knew what it was like to lose a lot of friends and get pulled out from school. He introduced us, which also happened on AIM because this was before the days of social media. Jose and I got along great, but I suspected it was really Matt. Just little things here and there, like them being on at the same time a lot, and some typing quirks in writing style. The differences in typing, they had seemed a bit fabricated, but he seemed like a three-dimensional person at least. I didn't say anything because I thought it was interesting Matt would pull that. I was really into psychology and all that kind of stuff, and I wanted to see where he would go with it if it was really the same person. At that point, I wasn't 100% sure and felt it could go either way. Needless to say, after talking to Jose, he confessed his feelings to me. Again, I wasn't interested and he was okay with that. Eventually, Matt and Jose started introducing me to more and more friends. It became blatantly obvious that they were all the same person. Jose was the only one who felt fleshed out. These people got increasingly two-dimensional and had very similar odd interests and the same typing style. I was sure it was all Matt. Still, I played along as if I believed it. Most of these were guys who would eventually try to date me. Some were girls who acted as rival characters. This continued on for a bit. He essentially created a fake group of friends in this town. Eventually, there was a night where nobody was on. Another thing that had tipped me off to the fact, these were all the same person at the beginning. They were on versus off at similar times. I ended up finding this IRC chat room. I really loved it and met a few cool real people. I started going on the chat more and more often and made friends there. This chat consumed the most of my time. I would also have AIM open and talk to Matt there, but my responses were growing slower. I was much more interested in the real people on the chat than the fake ones Matt created. I told Matt I was slow to respond because my computer was lagging. Some nights I didn't sign on AIM at all because I was talking to people in the chat instead. Matt didn't like this. When we did talk, it was increasingly filled with tension. When I said my computer was lagging, he said, "It's lagging because of that damn chat." He would snap at me about talking to other people on the chat and becoming closer to them whenever we did talk. I was getting fed up, especially since I really liked my new chat friends. One day, I signed on to AIM and got an angry message from him. Deciding it was the last straw, I wanted him to go away. I told him I didn't want to be friends anymore. He tried to protest, so I told him everything that I knew, all the people were fake, and I was just playing along with it. I just wanted to end things once and for all. He was angry. He denied that the people were fake, but instead questioned me. Were the things I said about myself and my life a lie too? It got scary at the end, telling me how much I would regret this. But nothing happened for a while and I disappeared. There was a forum I used to go on a lot at this time, and eventually a new user joined. This was common because it was pretty active, but this user had a quote from a movie I loved dealing with betrayal as his signature. Matt and I talked about this film a lot. This user kept trying to be friendly to me and message me. In the PM system, I told him that I knew it was Matt and he got angry. He threatened to kill me in a detailed, brutal manner. I still to this day have no idea how he found me on the forum. I never told him about it, didn't know personal information, and my username was different from anything he knew. I had gotten a new email after this because I didn't want to be contacted by him. He started emailing me, sending me pictures of places near my house, including my house. He did not know my address and only a PO box that is a few towns away, and places I went to a lot and never told him about. The emails were very creepy. I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want to be banned from talking to people online, which, looking back, was very stupid. I was scared. I had a cell phone by this point, and I never gave him the number, but he started calling me on it and leaving messages saying the same kind of things. How I should just take him back in my life because then he wouldn't have to do this to me. How he'd change my mind eventually, and if I did anything to make him angry, like grow close to other people. Threats. They were incredibly vivid and detailed. I have no idea how he found the new email or my phone and many of my accounts. I made a friend online who was a 4chan type wannabe hacker. After months of this, I asked him for advice and he said he would scare him away. I have no idea what he did and he wouldn't tell and be coy to avoid the question, but things de-escalated a lot after this. Matt had disappeared. Thought it would be the end. And every couple of months, even up to when I was in college, I'd meet someone through some site I was going on and know right away that it was him. He always had the same MO and never got better. When he knew that I was always on to him, instead he tried to become friends with my friends, I guess, to find out information about me. I had to warn friends for years later, both online and offline friends, about him just in case. At this point, I had wondered if even Chloe and Matt were the same person. One day, though, it stopped. I figured he grew bored. and it lasted for many years by that point though, so I was shocked but didn't complain. I always thought he would come back, but he never did. I ended up looking him and Chloe up on Facebook when this all felt distant to me, just to see if anything would come up. I found him. He was engaged to another girl. They had pictures on the beach where they wrote their names in a heart in the sand. I wondered if she even knew half of what he had done to me. I also looked up Chloe, and to my surprise, she was a real person and now had a baby. I don't know if the person I was talking to was actually Chloe though, or a fictional version created by Matt, or even vice versa. You know how when you talk about someone with a common name, you give nicknames to differentiate them from other people with the same name? Like Pokemon Matt, Firefighter Matt, etc. To this day, I call this guy Jose Matt. This happened when I was 10 years old. I was at a ski resort with my dad, stepmom, and 3 sisters. When this happened, my 2 sisters, dad, and stepmom were still out skiing, but I and my sister Ava got cold, so we went back to the hotel to get some food. We sat at the restaurant in the hotel until my stepmom came down. We asked her if she could hold the table so we could go up to the room quickly, so that we could drop off our ski jackets. So take the elevator, and once we got off, we start to walk to our room. That's when I hear somebody behind me go, "Hey." Keep in mind, we were both about 11 at the time. I didn't think he was talking to us, so I ignored it. We walked into our room, but before we could close the door, the man stepped into the doorway. He was tall, probably 6 foot, and looked pretty old. And he was wearing the hotel staff uniform, but without the logos. The thing that raised a big red flag for me was that he was wearing black surgical gloves. He says, "Hey, I was talking to you." We spin around, caught off guard. Ava says, "Us," he goes. "Yeah, you. I was wondering if you could grab a pitcher for me and come into my room to pour some water for me. Our parents always told us to never trust strangers, and we already got a bad vibe from him, so we politely declined." His tone then got a bit annoyed, and he said, "It will just take a second. Can you please just pour me some water in my room?" At this point, we already knew this wasn't right, so we said no again. This conversation went back and forth for probably 3 minutes until he tried to walk into our room. Our instincts kicked in at this point, and I ran toward the door and said, "Sir, we are good," and I slammed the door on him. Ava and I sat in the hotel room for about 10 minutes, panicking on how we were going to leave to talk to our parents because we had left our phones downstairs, and we looked out the peephole and he was finally gone. So we bolted down the hallway and ran back down the stairs to the restaurant. Once we told our stepmom, she was mortified and went to the office security. They interviewed us and asked for his description because they didn't have any cameras in the hallway. We gave them the description, and they told us that nobody with that description worked there and that most of them were young broke college students. At this point, it really set in that if I had accepted and just helped him, I might have died. So everybody, teach your kids stranger danger, and creepy hotel guy, let's not meet again. My hubby and I moved into this house a year and a half ago, and it all started just after lockdown. The neighbors on one side have a couple on the bottom half, 40s and a single man on the top half. It's all one big house, but they're pretty separate in their living arrangements. We have had drinks with the downstairs neighbors a couple of times, and the first time they introduced us to the upstairs guy, Trev, and told us after he left that he had some brain damage from falling off scaffolding a few years ago. I'm pretty much the most paranoid person in the world, but every time I've thought there was danger, I've been proven right almost straight away, so hubby doesn't bitch and takes me seriously. He even jokes that I've got a spidey sense for natural disasters. So I inquire a bit further. The lady of the house tells me very occasionally that he will have a psychotic break and be violent, but it's very rare, and once in a while he shaves the cats. Cue blank stare. She just laughed and said he's harmless, and she's got some knitted jumpers for the cats in case he does it again. So I work in construction, and due to you know what, I've been on and off work like a yo-yo, but had a few solid weeks off while hubby went to work. Trev noticed this and came over one day to make sure I'm okay on my own. I said yes, I'm fine, and my bloke will be home any minute, thanks. A few days later, I open the door, which has a window so you can see out, and throw the welcome mat out so I can beat it later. When I do this, however, he's standing there and halfway through saying something like he was chatting away well before I opened my door. Then he says, "Well, are you?" And I obviously ask what, to which he says, "Coming over for a smoke," and holds a joint out to me. I told him, "Sorry, mate, now I get drug tested for work," and thought that would be it. He just stared at me and said, "You're alone, though." "I know you are." And I'd had enough. Told him, "Yep, but I've got plenty of weapons, so I'm not worried." Turned and went back inside. Maybe it was petty of me, but I went back out an hour or so later and sharpened all of my machetes and knives, which I collect. There are a few dozen so far, and I made sure to do it in the front step, where I normally smoke, because I knew by then he was watching me. Other things include my tampons being taken from the windowsill on the toilet, only when the window is open, and there's no chance they'd fall because under that window is just flat concrete for ages. You would see them. My bins are being sorted through. My mail is being put on the step instead of left in the mailbox. Constantly seeing him hide and watch me while I'm cooking or doing dishes or even smoking outside. I spoke to the downstairs couple once, and the woman told me not to be so hard on him because he's got brain damage. I told her, "Speak to him. Tell him to not come over the property line ever again, or I will deal with it. With the law or a more permanent way, I will deal with it. So tell him." I haven't had him over since, but he still watches, and I still practice with my blades. I'm only 5'3" to his maybe 6'2", and no, I don't care what's wrong with him, I'll protect myself just fine. Hubby knows better and is staying out of the way, while still keeping an eye on things. He's there if I need him, but knows I'll sort out my own problems, just like the last time. Let's never ever meet again, creepy dude next door. So, this is my mom's story, not mine, but I felt the need to share this as a way to maybe help somebody who ever maybe have something like this happen. My mom was at Sam's Club all alone, shopping for groceries like most do on a Sunday when this man starts to follow her. She described this man as pretty obviously not all there, wearing typical gang clothing or clothes people wear in prison. Shorts, a long shirt, and high socks. That's what they look like where we live, at least. The man also had a tattoo on his eye, a spade like on a deck of cards. I just want to say very quickly that my mom is very small, 4'11" at most, and she is pretty innocent looking. She is one of those ladies who like to wear all pink and wear pigtails, just for reference of how different these two people are in the situation at hand. So my mom starts to get pretty anxious as this man starts to follow her through the store, getting closer and closer as time goes by, eventually seeming to get so close that they could be shopping together. She tried to make eye contact with a worker to try and get help, but the worker didn't see her and kept working. She also tried to tell the man following her that she has a husband and she wasn't interested in hanging out with him, but that didn't stop him from making comments about it. Eventually, another worker comes up and my mom makes eye contact with her and mouths "help me" to her. The lady quickly acts and tries to get the man to move away from my mom without showing my mom is scared. He wouldn't move, saying my mom and he are good friends shopping together. My mom said she almost lost her cool right then, scared out of her mind. Then the lady asked my mom to come with her for her refund items, and they walked with her. The man continued to follow them, but the worker took my mom into a back room, and she had two other workers come and get the man following my mom out of the store. They had a very large man follow my mom around the store and make sure she was safe the rest of the time she shopped. Apparently, the man following my mom had been following somebody else, and they had gotten away and saw him start to follow my mom, so let the worker know. My mom's husband came and picked her up just in case he was still around the area. But to the man who followed my mom, let's not meet, and please don't meet my mom again. I, 23 female, went to Vietnam last year to see my little sister. At the time, she worked there for a few months for an internship. I bought an eSIM before going there in order to get a Grab to join Hanoi from the airport. Unfortunately, it was not working and a taxi driver stopped me to ask if I needed a ride. I knew at the time that he would overcharge me for the ride, but I accepted since I could not call for my sister or use the internet. He was nice and could speak English, so we had a little chat before going. Maybe 15 minutes in, he told me his shift was finished and that he would transfer me to one of his colleagues to get me to Hanoi. I wasn't that surprised, since it's quite common in South Asia to transfer clients from one taxi to another when a shift is done. It happened to my sister a few times, and she told me about it, so I just accepted it. I was super tired from my trip and didn't think much about it. However, I got a super bad feeling going to the next taxi. First, he didn't have a camera inside the vehicle, which is mandatory in Vietnam when you're a Grab driver. Second, I asked multiple times if he needed the address, and he never answered. I asked in English first, and then used Google Translate to tell him in Vietnamese twice. He was driving faster as I asked, still not answering. I panicked, started speaking loudly, and tried to open the doors. They were obviously locked since he was driving. Plus, we were on the highway already. I took my real SIM and put it in my phone to call my sister. I just thought to myself, screw it if I pay a lot. She answered right away, and I tried to tell her the most I could. She was with her Vietnamese colleague, and she had the wonderful idea to speak Vietnamese to me on the phone. She said loudly that I was smart for noting down the license plate number, that we're never sure, but she was sure it was going to be alright. To be fair, I didn't write down his license plate, but her lie was very clever. The guy reacted for the first time. He asked me what was the exact address in Vietnamese, because he didn't know where he should go after arriving in Hanoi. My sister's colleague answered for me. Note that I didn't understand anything at the time it happened, since I don't speak Vietnamese. That colleague explained that to me the next day. He seemed stressed out from this very moment and was tapping on the steering wheel. Eventually, he got me to the address after 30 minutes, without speaking to me but looking at me through his interior mirror. He literally ejected my luggage from his trunk. He took the money, and he obviously overcharged, but I was just glad to be alive and left very fast. I did not even have time to actually note down his license plate. I still had a wonderful trip in Vietnam, but to this taxi driver there, that's not me. The events in this story are all true, and to be quite honest, scare the living shit out of me. I may pretend to be tough and brave, but I'm quite easily spooked. And this is by far the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me to date. I usually feel fairly safe in my town, but this one incident has certainly awakened me to the fact that no place is perfectly safe. It was this New Year's Eve just gone when my friend called and asked if I wanted to go to the New Year's Eve festival at the beach with her and her boyfriend. Being the kind of person who normally just stays at home and does nothing special for this particular holiday, I agreed. Every New Year's Eve, my town holds a festival at the beach in celebration. Rides and games are set up, bands play live music, clubs hold fancy dress parties late at night, and at midnight on the dot, a series of fireworks displays are put out for the public. Normally thousands of people turn up, so the beach can get quite loud and crowded, but it's still a pleasant atmosphere all around. Before hanging up, my friend Jess asks me if I will pick her and her boyfriend Tyler up on the way to the beach. She also lets me know that one of our other close friends is coming along and that we should go straight to her unit so that we can all walk down to the festival together. I tell Jess, no problem, and then go to get ready. In about half an hour I'm ready. I do not yet have my license, and so I asked my dad if he would pick up my friends and drop us all off. He agreed. It only takes about 3 minutes to drive to my friend's place, and then a further 10 minutes to drive to my other friend's unit. My other friend Haley lives in a small 2-bedroom unit with her mom. The unit is right next to the beach, and it only takes about 5 minutes to walk down to where the festival takes place. When we arrive, she is already outside waiting for us, standing on the balcony and enjoying the sunset. We all file out of the car, making sure to thank my dad for dropping us off, and then head upstairs to greet Haley. We all hug and begin to catch up, as we hadn't seen each other for a couple of months. Graduation, work, and life got in the way. We all headed inside for about 10 minutes to grab a drink and catch up a bit more. Haley's mother came out and talked to us for a bit as well. At this point, the sun had almost well and truly disappeared, and so we decided this was the perfect time to head down to the festival. The walk down to the beach was pleasant. It was a warm summer night. There was a cool breeze to ward off the heat, and the whole area smelled of cotton candy, buttered corn, and warm donuts. We spent the first few hours going on rides together, and then we went and bought some food and sat down on the sand to eat it. So far, the night was amazing, as usually whenever I went out with my friends, there was always a parent with us. No parents this time. It felt great. felt like freedom. After eating, we went up to the stage where the live bands were playing and danced for about an hour. There were plenty of classics being played, such as YMCA, Time Warp, and various hits from Greece. All in all, it was a really fun time. After an hour of dancing to music, the four of us decided to head back to Haley's unit for a drink of water, and we had all spent our money. At this point, it was well and truly dark, around 11 o'clock, and the heat of the day had subsided to a pleasant warmth. We walked along the path merrily, saying Happy New Year to every passing group or cop. A few party-goers on the 4th floor of an apartment complex shouted, "Hope you have an epic New Year," drunkenly at us. We laughed and wished them the same. As we walked further away from the crowds and the noise, the light grew less and less. There aren't many streetlights near my friend's unit, and we were soon engulfed in a soothing darkness, with only the moon to light our way. It was at this point that I, for some reason, began to feel uneasy. It was too quiet for my tastes. You know that feeling you get when you're being watched, or at least think you're being watched? That exact feeling washed over me, and I subconsciously moved to walk in between Haley and Tyler, instead of walking on the outside of the group. I shrugged off the feeling after that, attributing it to the fact that perhaps my ears were just used to the loud noises of the festival. They were, after all, ringing a bit. We ran into another group of people we knew from school along the way, and feeling was completely forgotten. I had missed these people after graduation and immediately struck up friendly, light-hearted conversation. We parted ways as we made it to Haley's unit block and climbed the stairs to her unit. Haley's mom and the mom's boyfriend greeted us upon our arrival, and we all got a drink of water from the refrigerator before relaxing together on the couch. We were all a tad worn out at this point, and the fireworks weren't for another hour, so we decided to chill out the unit and head down to the beach at around 11:45. We all joked around and had a snack, and then Haley asked if she can sleep over at my place. I ring my folks and check if it's okay with them, and they give me the okay. My parents love having Haley over. She's a very well-mannered person and likes to help out where she can. At 11:45, we all leave the unit and begin heading down to the beach. We only get about a minute down the road before Haley says that she has forgotten her pain medication for her bad knee, which she is supposed to take before bed. At this, Jess seems a little bit annoyed, but reluctantly agrees that we should go back so that we do not have to make another trip back to hers at the end of the night. We head back, and the whole way Jess seems a little distant, like her mind isn't on the conversation at hand and she's focused on something else. I am the most quiet and observant one of the group, so I notice her silence pretty quickly, since usually she's a big chatterbox. I ask her if she's alright, and she replies with, "Of course," so I simply leave her to her thoughts. After retrieving Haley's pain medication, we head back out again. This time Jess suggests that we walk on the other side of the road where it is more well lit and there are parents with their children on the playground. We think nothing of it and agree. As both Haley and I have poor night vision, and a bit more light would be rather welcome. When we are halfway across the road, Jess mutters to us, "Don't look behind us." My first thought is that maybe there is a drunk with their pants down taking a piss against the wall or something. But then Jess adds, "Walk faster." I begin to feel uneasy and immediately obey her request, knowing that whenever Jess seriously tells us to do something, it's usually for a very good reason. None of us look back, despite that nagging human instinct to look. I trust Jess. When we are across the road, I ask Jess what is wrong and what has her so on edge. She replies to me, "There are 3 guys in black hoodies following us. I recognize them from earlier." Earlier? I think to myself, puzzled, and then Jess explains that she saw those same 3 men. They had to be men. They were very tall and bulky when we came to the unit for water earlier. A chill runs down my spine at this, and I realize that my sense of being watched probably came from those men. What made me even more creeped out was the fact that they had waited all that time for us to come out. Unable to resist, I glance sideways out of my peripheral vision, and my heart hammers in my chest when I notice the 3 men. They are indeed rather pointedly following us, and they have their hoodies on zipped up all the way to their chins. This would not be so unusual if not for the fact that it was a hot night. There was no need for a hoodie or any kind of jacket, and they were wearing bandanas over their mouths and noses. I could not make out either of their facial features. This scared me. Jess prompts us again not to look and suggests that we walk even faster. We do so, despite the fact that Haley, Tyler, and I are tall and strongly built people. I should mention now that I'm an 18-year-old female, and despite my build and reasonable strength, I understandably didn't want to tangle with three big unknown men dressed all in black with bandanas covering their features. It crossed my mind that they probably thought we were good targets. Jess was short and thin. They most likely heard that Haley needs pain medication. I walked with an obvious limp as I have arthritis in my right knee, and Tyler had his hands full, being the pack mule, as they call it. Despite Jess's instruction, I can't help but give the occasional glance at the three men, and of course they continued to follow us. They had even increased their pace to nearly match ours and kept looking over at us. I think they meant to intimidate us, as they made it quite obvious that they were staring at us. I ceased to look, realizing that they could probably tell I was keeping an eye on them, and instead opted to use my keen hearing to make sure they stayed across the road. I wasn't fond of this, as they could have a knife or a gun or anything, and if they suddenly sprinted at us, I wouldn't be prepared, but I didn't want to provoke them by staring. I am not a fast runner, and my stamina leaves much to be desired. At this point, the path ends and gives way to bushes and shrubs. The bushland is quite easy to go around, but doing so would mean moving closer to the unknown men following us. None of us wanted to do that, so we all make an unspoken agreement to take a shortcut through the bushes. The bushland doesn't go on for very long, and it would take us straight to the festival where we could quite possibly lose those men. We head into the bushes, taking care to stay together and watch for snakes, as summer is the season when the snakes like to come out most, especially at the beach. It's Snake City. About halfway through, we all recognize the sound of dried glass and leaves crunching underfoot. Then we hear rapid and heavy footsteps. We all broke into a sprint, not daring to look back at that point. We didn't have to look to know the men were chasing us, and their confidence at going after four fully grown teenagers pretty much assured me that they were armed with weapons of some sort. We were not armed with anything, and quite frankly, we were all so spooked that we couldn't think straight. Our only instinct was to run as fast as possible. We made it out of the bushland together, raced across the car park and slowed to a jog when we reached the crowds. We didn't stop, but as we steadily slowed to a hurried walk, I looked over my shoulder and recognized the three unknown men lurking across the car park. Moonlight glinted off the surface of a metallic object in the taller one's hand, and I immediately felt ill. We hurried down to where the biggest crowd was, gathered on the sand in preparation for the fireworks. Picking a spot between two large groups, we settled down and caught our breaths. Funnily enough, all four of us have asthma, which we have often joked about, saying that we found each other and bonded because of it, and we were all panting quite heavily. Tyler and I have it a bit worse than Haley and Jess, and you could hear us wheezing as we panted. Soon the fireworks started, and we had all calmed enough to somewhat enjoy them, although the unknown men were still in the back of our minds. Our original plan had been to leave before the fireworks were finished so that we could avoid the big crowds, but instead we opted to leave with the crowds. We walked down the road to the bigger car park where my dad was going to pick us up, making sure to stay around people. When we reached the car park, I called my dad, and he said that he would be there to pick us up in about 10 minutes. After hanging up, I sat on the side of the path with my friends and waited. 5 minutes passed by, and bored, I decided to look around as there were still many bustling crowds making their way to their cars. There was a bit of a traffic jam too, as many cars were trying to leave at the same time. I looked across the road and realized with a jolt that the three men in the black hoodies were there, half hidden behind a tree where there was no light. Even though I couldn't see their eyes, I could tell they were staring right back. They knew I spotted them. The taller one discreetly showed his knife, waving it a little as if to taunt me. Then he raised it to his throat and made a slow mock slicing motion. I quickly told my friends, and we moved to a different spot, making sure to stay in the light and stay in sight of people. My dad arrived soon after, and we all quickly climbed into the car. None of us spoke a word of what happened, and since then I haven't had any issues with anyone following me or my friends. It still gives me the creeps though. Whoever those men were, their intentions could not have been good. Four years ago, when I was 17, female, my best friend Hannah, also 17, came over to my house for the weekend. I believe it was that Saturday night when it happened. We stayed up late, ate some junk food, watched movies, etc. It was around 1 a.m. when I decided to take a shower and head to bed. After our horror movie marathon, I was pretty paranoid, so I asked Hannah to sit in the bathroom with me while I showered, so She did just that. She sat on the toilet and played some music on her cell phone, and we talked about whatever we had going on in our lives while I showered. Finally, after my probably 20-minute shower, I got out and grabbed the towel. Hannah was still sitting on the toilet and she said my name, so I turned to face her. That's when I noticed some movement in the bathroom window above her head. The window cling distorted it slightly, but I immediately knew what I was looking at. A face. A man's face, smirking at me from the other side of the glass. The man ducked out of view and I quickly faced away, wrapping my towel around me. I whispered to Hannah that there was a man looking in the window and she laughed, thinking I was messing with her. So she bravely stands up and to her horror becomes face to face with this creep, staring and smiling. We run out of the bathroom and wake my parents, but the creep dude is already gone by the time my dad gets outside, and he better be glad for that. The next day my parents investigate outside the window. There was a cinder block underneath it that the man had been standing on, indicating this probably wasn't the first time he peeped on me. And stuffed between the block and the wall, a bag of lotion. The window cling was useless, as you could see everything inside the bathroom clearly from the outside, but we didn't know that at the time. Still, I can't shower without having the bathroom windows covered. In high school, I had to write a paper that summarized my life story starting from birth. I reflected on my earliest memories, and when I remembered this, I had to sit down. My heart pounded as I realized what actually happened and what my 4-year-old self couldn't understand. When I was a kid, my family often vacationed with their friends' families, and we'd all live together in a giant beach house or cabin for a week. This must have been one of the first of those vacations. I wanted to hang out with the rest of the kids, but since they were all at least 1 year older than me, they thought I wasn't cool. I followed my sister around the house, but since she didn't want to play with me, I mostly just eavesdropped on everybody's conversations. One day, all of the kids happened to be in one room. No adults, plenty of toys, and a lot of fun. Off to the side was this tiny door, the tiniest I'd ever seen, which led to a dark, empty room. I remember we were absolutely fascinated by that tiny door, and the older kids would make up stories about it. Jennifer was the eldest, and in my memories, she's a teenager, but that might be skewed since I thought everybody in the double digits was super mature. She even knew how to use her mom's cell phone. All the kids were playing, having fun, enjoying their childhood. Then Jennifer got a call. She had asked us to be quiet several times, and she sounded really serious. I thought this request was silly and a little annoying since I really wanted to play. The call ended. Jennifer told us, "My dad is coming back here soon." Jennifer's dad had driven away for a few hours, but now was driving back. Someone asked questions about where he went and what he was doing. I think she said something about drinking. At some point, Jennifer addressed all of us and said something like, "My dad looks at kids and takes them on drives. You all have to be really careful when he comes back." I couldn't grasp anything else she said. Then she talked to a girl and a boy. I noticed he was looking at you two a lot, so you both have to be really, really careful. I think he wants to take you each on a drive, but don't go with him if he asks. Their conversation went on for a while, and I felt jealous that they talked so much with Jennifer and that her dad was looking at them instead of me. Why wasn't I special? I grew bored of listening to them and went back to playing. A car pulled up, and Jennifer told us to go in the tiny door room. We brought some toys along. I was psyched to go through the tiny door, but it ended up being a dark, empty room without any fairies or hobbits. After a while, we left. As far as I know, nothing bad happened on that trip. I grew up with the two kids Jennifer talked to, and they seemed pretty well adjusted. But Jennifer and her family never vacationed with us again. I told my family this story, and they thought it was an imaginary memory that my 4-year-old brain had concocted. My parents are positive there aren't any weird, creepy, or alcoholic dads there, just their good friends. My sister didn't remember any of it. I can't rationalize how or why I would have imagined it. My childhood was great, and I have zero concept of pedophiles or alcoholism until I was at least like 11. Luckily, this experience did not ruin tiny doors for me in the slightest. I love some tiny doors. This was back in January of 2018. It took me a few years and a little therapy to be able to talk about it. I'm okay now, and I thought I would share. It's a little long, but buckle up. I I was part of a study abroad program in Bangkok, which was awesome for the record. Not long after being there, my fellow students and I went out for a night on the town. After a night of drinking and running amok in Bangkok, we somehow end up in a back alley illegal strip club area. Here is where I think it's important to mention that I am a female, and I was the only female in the group that night. I saw things that I'll never unsee in the 15 minutes we were there, and it honestly keeps me up at night once in a while. Let's just say that it was pretty obvious the women did not want to be there. Very quickly, I also didn't want to be there. After about 5 minutes into this really misguided decision, I realized that 2 guys from my group are talking to a guy in a red polo shirt. Oh man, there are many guys in red polo shirts scattered throughout the room, and none of them look very pleasant. One of my buddies, let's call him M, comes back over to me laughing, points back at the red shirt and says, "Hey, he's trying to get me to sell you to him for $10 American, but I keep telling him you're worth more. $10 is the highest he says he'll go." I have never noped out of a situation so fast in my entire life, and everybody went with me. I am an experienced traveler, so I did take the opportunity to use this as a learning experience for M, as to how quickly these situations can go south, and how important it is to be on guard in a foreign country. I'm thinking he learned his lesson. We all got out safe, no harm, no foul. I admit that I became a little bit more withdrawn from the group. Everybody went out partying every night. I went to school, occasionally ate out, did some daytime shopping at the markets, or hung out in a high-end spa near the hotel. For like 20 to 50 American dollars, you can get pampered like a queen, and a broke college kid took advantage. 2 other girls joined me on my adventures, and we had a great time overall. Before we were scheduled to return back to the States, my other classmates, it was really all M, finally convinced me to go out for a night on the town with them to some strip. People were eating scorpions on a stick. Some dumb girl from Australia who had joined our group took a hit of some gas they were selling on the street and threw up everywhere. People were packed in elbow to elbow, and there was a lot of rave-style lights and music. Sensory overload. I figured that I'm with a group of 20 people from the US and Australia. If there was a time to drink and party in a foreign country, this is going to be it. So the drinking started, and the party began. With drinking eventually comes the need for a restroom, so I told M I was going to find one and I'd be right back. M chose the moment to be a diva, start hammering back drinks, and demanded everyone's attention. I might have gone about 10 minutes tops. I come back and everyone is gone. I got the story later that the Aussies left and the rest of my group had to chase down M when he ran off in a drunken display for attention. So I walk over to the entrance of the strip where we were dropped off and sit on a picnic table near all the cabs to wait for my group. 2.5 hours go by. It's almost 1 a.m., the street is still packed, and I have seen no one from my group. I'm starting to get a little bit concerned because I have no idea where we are really. The others have been coming to this strip every night, and it was my first time. Screw it. Okay. Experienced traveler. I don't even have the address to the hotel written down in English or in Thai even, and I don't even speak Thai. Luckily, I haven't had a drink in like 2.5 hours, so I am pretty stone cold sober at this point. I've also been here long enough to know that taking a tuk-tuk, open wheelie cab thing, is much cheaper than taking an actual cab, but not long enough to realize that taking a tuk-tuk at 1 a.m. alone as a female is a horrible idea. I showed the driver my room key. The naive child I was. We negotiate a price and I hop in, but he goes in the opposite direction from where our cab came in from to drop us off initially, and we took a highway to get there, but my tuk-tuk driver is on all residential streets. Then he hits an alley. Okay, I am on red alert right now. He stops. I am poised, ready to strike should I need to, and next to me on my left, a garage door rolls up. One of those ratty pull-up / pull-down by hand ones, and a group of men come out, one of whom is holding a blue purse. I stuck around just long enough to watch him start walking over and unzip said purse as he moved, and I bolted. I barely shook off the tuk-tuk driver, just kept putting one foot in front of the other, crying because I couldn't breathe and thinking to myself that I might die because I couldn't be bothered to go to a gym. I ran until I saw it. The familiarity of home, a 7-Eleven in the middle of this Thai neighborhood. I'm hysterical as I come through that door like the Kool-Aid man himself. The cashier starts yelling at me to get out in Thai, and I'm yelling in English that my tuk-tuk driver tried to sell me and I'm not going anywhere. We went at it for a minute or two of me begging him to help me, and this little tiny 4-foot elderly Thai woman comes up to me with an equally tiny grocery cart full of 2-liter bottles of Pepsi. She takes my hand and my room key. She never says a word to me. Not a single word. She leads me outside, hails a cab, has a solid 60-second conversation with the driver, and pushes me into the back seat. The scariest part of my entire night, though, was that 15-minute cab ride back to my hotel, not knowing if this little Thai woman had sold me out or sent me home to safety. The cab driver had to stop and ask for directions about 3 minutes from the hotel, and that was probably the moment I knew this was going to affect me mentally. The ride cost me $10 American, and I tipped him $60. For not selling me into the slave trade. I was at the gas station and went up to the register to buy some gas and some drinks as I was going on a small road trip. I got there and there was a large balding man with a ginger beard with the name tag Guy. I smiled at him and was polite since I work customer service and try to be nice to everyone because you'll never know what kind of day said person might be having. Guy smiled at me and asked if we've met before. I've never seen him in my life, and I made a joke saying, "I just have one of those faces," and laughed it off. I had alarm bells ringing in my head because of his tone. I had a deep sinking feeling in my gut as he took his time checking me out. Guy kept talking to me, saying I looked great today, and he guessed my dead name. But I haven't told anyone my dead name in years, as I am non-binary and hate people knowing. I tried my best and keep that name a secret. Plus, I was paying with cash, so I couldn't think of a way that he would know. I smiled more to brush it off, trying to imply that wasn't my actual name, saying, "No, I go by Royal." He frowned and scratched his beard, and I could have sworn I saw bloody dandruff or something like that come down onto the counter. I took my change and went out to my car, filling it up as quickly as I could. I pulled out my phone with the intent to let others know my location and just to tell my friends and my mom. Feeling hot breath in my neck and someone's body pressed up against my back, I spun around and there was Guy. The most worst smell hit my nose as I looked down at me. I'm 5'6", and my best guess is he was about 6 foot. Guy smiled, multiple of his teeth had been missing. He said I was rude for talking about him behind his back, and I laughed it off and apologized. I went to quickly get the gas pump out of the car. Before I could even get my hand on it, Guy grabbed it from me and did it for me, smiling and saying that I shouldn't bother doing such manly things. He went to explain that he finally knew where he knew me from. He explained I was a sex slave in a past life, that he was my master, and that he knew my frame anywhere. I'm 17, mind you, and I have never met this man in my life. I nodded and tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, really?" I didn't want to anger him. The man didn't seem to be happy with that as I tried to go around and get into my car. He opened the passenger door to get it. I was in full panic mode and had started my car and put the pedal to the metal, with both doors swinging open. As I drove away, Guy had fallen to the ground and started to scream and curse. I pulled over after a mile and shut both of them. This happened a few years ago when I was around 20 or so. I was hanging out with my buddy Matt in my apartment, located in the downtown area of a medium-sized Midwestern city. We were drinking whiskey, watching comedies, playing tunes, etc. He mentions that he has a close friend named Emily, who used to live in my apartment building with her mom. She now lives across the street from me, and he thought it would be a swell idea if we met, because apparently we are very similar, and I was single and ready to mingle at that point in my life. He rings her cell and tells her to come by my place. She arrived at my apartment, and I instantly became fond of her. She was hilarious, very pretty, and a musician like me. She was around 30, so about 10 years older than me. My friend Matt was 35. I've always had friends that are much older, for some reason. We played songs together and laughed hysterically for hours. Matt decided to go home, leaving us two alone. We chilled for a while longer, ended up making out, and I got all of her contact info before she told me she is going home, that we can meet up soon. Over the next few weeks, we developed a strong relationship, and we hang out almost daily. I would throw some pajamas on and walk across the street, and we would get wasted and watch movies. It was cool. After arriving home from my 10-day trip to New York City, things got really weird. The day I returned, she asked if she could come over, so I unpacked my stuff and then told her to stop by. She rings the buzzer, takes the elevator 7 floors up to my apartment, and lets herself in. I was talking nonstop about how all the awesome things I did and the people I met in New York City, and I could immediately tell she didn't want to hear any of it. She would change the subject every time I brought it up, and eventually she said, "Can you stop talking about New York? I really don't care." I was surprised to hear her speak like this. The Emily I had been getting to know was not like this. She was caring and passionate and an amazing person. At least I thought. Fast forward to a few nights later, I had just gotten home from working a 12-hour shift, and I collapsed in bed, ready to pass out for the night. It's about 9 p.m., and I get a text from Emily that says, "Hey, what's up?" I don't feel much like replying at that moment. I am too exhausted, and our last hangout was too weird for me to comprehend, so I am still trying to decide how to deal with that. I plug my phone in to charge, turn the lights off, and fall asleep effortlessly. All of a sudden, I wake up to somebody pounding on my door and screaming at the top of their lungs. "Open the door. Let me in now." My entire apartment reeks like cigarette smoke. I grab my phone from beside my bed, my heart beating a million miles per hour. 27 missed phone calls, a bunch of text messages, all from Emily. I scan through the text while she's still at the door screaming, trying to break my door down. The most recent text from her is a long one claiming I'm a piece of shit for not responding to her text earlier and that she's coming over to beat the heck out of me for not doing so. She had a key to the building still from when she used to live there. I get out of bed nearly having a panic attack and try to decide what my next move should be. Should I open the door and calm her? Should I call the police? Should I just ignore her? I decide to open the door. She begins wailing at me, swinging her arms trying to hit me. She was smoking a cigarette, and there were about 3 cigarette butts on the ground next to her. Smoking indoors was prohibited in my apartment building, mind you. She was very obviously on some sort of drug. She kept screaming at me, telling me how awful I am for not responding to her last message, slurring her speech and losing her balance. I was somehow able to calm her down, and I took her to the roof of the apartment building, which had a pretty nice little enclosed picnic table area. We sat beside one another, and she was quiet now finally. She kept asking me how I could be such an asshole and that I needed to explain myself. The look in her eyes was pure evil as she spoke to me in a calm demeanor now. I said to her, "Emily, I don't ever want to speak to you again after tonight. This whole scenario is absolutely insane. You need help. Let me walk you home." I take her home and return to my apartment to attempt sleeping, at which I do not succeed. A couple of days later, I return home from work and there is an envelope taped to my door. I open it and it's a handwritten letter from Emily apologizing and saying that I'm a beautiful human who doesn't deserve an evil person like her in their life. There was a literal candy bar attached to the envelope, one that I had never even heard of that she always told me I needed to try. Never spoke to her again. From what Matt tells me, which by the way, he always knew she was a problematic person, she is even a heavy user of crack now and is working as a food runner in a restaurant nearby. A couple of years ago, during the summer after my junior year of high school, my friends went to the beach to see the 4th of July fireworks. A bit of background information. I lived in a county away from my friends and wasn't familiar with the area around that beach, and only one friend, Shelby, lived anywhere near the beach. The others lived much further inland. None of us could drive, so we walked several miles to the town beach from Shelby's house before the fireworks, and we're making our way back in the late evening around 10 o'clock. There's a certain distance from the beach where the crowd from the fireworks always disperses as they make their way down the side streets, at around the point where the major shops in the town are. But we had to keep following the straight road to the center of the town to get back to Shelby's house. The streets are always mostly empty at that point, with only a few stragglers and the occasional cop at a very busy intersection. There were 4 of us, Shelby, Amber, Hannah, and myself, walking in rows of 2 with our arms linked together. We had a pretty good time and were still feeling kind of giddy and goofy. Hannah was my partner and Shelby and Amber were walking behind us. We were on a bit of a stretch of road with no side streets, with a bunch of smaller shops, fast food joints, gas stations, etc., where everything was closed due to the holiday in the late hour. There was a group of a few men, around their late 20s or early 30s, standing on the sidewalk outside an empty gas station. They didn't move to get off the path when they saw us walking around them, which I thought was weird, but it was a holiday and they were obviously drunk, so we stepped slightly into the street to walk around them. One man grabbed Hannah's arm while we were trying to pass by and asked if she had a cigarette on her. None of my friends smoked at the time, so we very honestly said no, and continued to walk once Hannah pulled her arm away. The man was tall and fairly well built, and we were all pretty short, so we were a little startled, but we didn't think much of it as we walked down the street. We even made a few jokey comments about it when we were far enough away from the station. Several minutes later, Amber and Shelby fell a bit behind because one of the crappy flip-flops Amber was wearing slipped off her foot. Hannah and I didn't notice and kept walking, and the next thing we know, Shelby and Amber were leaning over our shoulders and whispering that the man from the station who tried to ask Hannah for a cigarette was following us a few yards back, without any of his friends in tow. We were all a little bit freaked out at that point, but we decided that it was possible that he just happened to be going in the same direction, so we picked up the pace and continued down the street. At this point, there were intersections that started appearing every few blocks or so we switched to the other side of the street at one end, kept going. We thought that we probably had nothing to worry about anymore until Amber looked over her shoulder at the next intersection and saw the guy on the same side of the street as us again. We switched once more and he switched with us, but the third time we switched, the man didn't. Instead, he kept walking on the other side of the street. A bit after the intersection, a big commercial truck was parked on our side that blocked the view of most of the street in front of us. Something didn't feel right to me, so I made everyone hang back a few seconds and we stopped a couple of yards away from the truck. Lo and behold, the gas station guy crossed in front of the truck and headed down the side street next to it that was between two shops that were already closed for the evening. Shelby started swearing and we turned around and ran back to the intersection and down the street that intersected the street that we had been walking on. We were only an empty train parking lot away from Shelby's house then, so we kept running full tilt down the street, and all the lot as she explained that the side street he walked into wasn't a real street, just a dead-end alley between two restaurants. Nobody familiar with the area would walk down there on purpose, but it would be the perfect place to go if you wanted to get the jump on someone walking by. Yesterday, I called in sick to work. I wanted to stay home and work on a paper for grad school, plus I wasn't feeling up for working on a Friday. In the late afternoon, all of my roommates were out. My fiance and one roommate went out to a bar, and the third had left for work. While working on my paper and surfing the internet, I heard a knock on the door. We live on the 4th floor with no elevator, so when somebody actually comes up, they usually have a good reason. I immediately get up and head towards the front door. About halfway down the hall, I realize it could be my boss or coworker coming to make sure I'm feeling well. They've been to my apartment, and it's like them to visit. With that idea in my head, I decide to peek through the peephole to see if I have to feign illness or not. It's not them. Ever have your head scream, "Don't open the door"? It was one of the first times it ever happened to me. Two white men in their late 20s were standing at my door with a duffel bag. They had been quietly chatting with one another, but I couldn't make out what they were saying exactly. Both had thick Eastern European accents, maybe Russian or Ukrainian. I paused, watching them through the peephole. They seemed friendly enough, but I've seen enough horror movies to know that opening the door or letting them know I'm there is a bad idea. Besides, I was in a pajama set without a bra. I didn't need someone trying to sell me something. I kept watching them as they went to the next door, knocking on that one as well. There are 4 apartments on our floor, so I watched them go to each one. Very slowly, I turned the lock on my door, making sure to keep it quiet. If they were trying to sell me something, I didn't want to insult them by loudly locking the door. They didn't seem to hear me, their quiet chatter never stopping. I think I heard them talk about the Final Four basketball game that was on tonight. One of my neighbors opened the door. I don't know her name, as most of the people on my floor keep to themselves, but I saw her move in a few months ago, and ran into her again when the fire alarms went off at 6 a.m. She has a fat cat and works early, that's all I know. They speak louder now, and I can hear them talk about perfume. In my area, it's not uncommon for people to sell a bunch of designer knockoff perfumes, or some kind of natural stuff made of lavender, in fairy tears or something. They hold up some kind of bottles from the bag to show her, and she says something back. I can't hear her. She retreats into her apartment and the men follow, closing the door behind them. I went back to my paper, feeling stupid for being scared of two guys selling perfume at a high markup. A couple hours later, after one roommate has returned from work, I get another knock on the door. This time I don't think about it and open the door immediately. To my surprise, it's a police officer. I can see the lights flashing from the ground floor. We have garden-style apartments, and judging by the amount of lights, there must be a couple of cars. He apologizes for disturbing us so late. It's about 11 p.m., but he would like to know if anyone was home during the day. I told him I was here, and he proceeded to ask me a few questions, along the lines of, have you heard anything odd, and have you seen anyone you don't know in the complex, and things like that. Immediately, I tell him about the two men. He nods and writes down a few things. I give a basic description, but I can't describe them too well. I have a shit memory for faces, and I only saw them through a peephole. He takes my contact info and thanks me for my help. I asked him what happened, but he just thanked me again and left. Her apartment door was closed, but there wasn't any kind of police tape on the door or really indication that they were in there. This morning, I heard a lot of commotion on the stairs. I looked out the door, and there was a moving truck. The woman's husband was helping carry boxes and bags downstairs. It almost looked like moves that I used to do in college, with belongings thrown into trash bags. I just went back inside. A few hours later, I received a community-wide email from our leasing office, telling us not to open the door for unknown visitors under any circumstance. I had a package waiting at the office, so I headed down to get it. While in the mailroom, with the receptionist, I made a comment about how my neighbor is moving out so soon after moving in. Offhandedly, she says, I'd move too if that happened to me. When I asked what she meant, she immediately clammed up and started to hurry me out. I have no idea what happened, but I'm happy to be moving apartments soon. Update 1. I spoke with somebody else at the leasing office, taking the approach of a tenant, concerned that somebody will rob me as well. I talked to a community captain. They help tenants out with problems, one assigned to each zone of the complex, and flat out asked if my neighbor was robbed. Her response was, well, yeah. She was very hesitant and followed up, saying that the couple would not like the details of what happened to be released. I might have hit a dead end here, but I'll try to follow up with the receptionist when she comes in tomorrow. Am I allowed to flat out ask the police what happened since it was so close to me? Update 2. Earlier this evening, 8 p.m. or so, I heard my neighbors chatting while I was walking upstairs. A lot of you guessed it. Unfortunately, she was assaulted. I wasn't going to share it, as someone mentioned below that we should respect their privacy and wishes not to have this mentioned. The reason I'm bringing this up is to emphasize how terrified I am because I just heard a knock on my door. I was up late submitting my paper, yay procrastination, and I heard a knock on someone else's door. Considering it's almost midnight, there isn't much noise to drown that kind of thing out. I tried to brush it off. Maybe one of my cats was doing something, but then I definitely heard it on my door. I'm too terrified to go look out the peephole, but I called the police. I hope that does something. Update 3. False alarm. Some shithead teenagers who decided to scare people in the complex after seeing the email. Multiple people called in, so I think our floor was randomly chosen. Cops picked them up and called me back, letting me know not to worry.